Good day. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining us on the Coach Launch podcast today. Good to have you here.
Matthew, thank you. I'm excited to be here, although I'm a little jealous because you're probably a little warmer than I am over here in Utah.
Oh, you're in Australia. It's super warm today. Guys, welcome back to the Coach Launch podcast, the show where we give business owners, entrepreneurs, and coaches the real world strategies to grow, scale, and actually enjoy the business they're building. Today's guest is the definition of a battle tested entrepreneur. Over the last 3 decades, Chris has built and scaled multiple businesses, from a $15 million award-winning construction company to cutting-edge resorts and restaurants. And amongst other things, being a finalist in the Ernest and Young Entrepreneur of the Year, named to Utah Business Magazine 40 Under 40, and honored with the Big 50 Award. And he's taking all of those bootstraps and battle scars and putting them into work to help other founders. Today, Chris is the founder of Bootstraps and Battle Scars and Founders Exchange, where he coaches entrepreneurs, CEOs, and owners who are successful on paper but carrying invisible weight, helping them regain clarity, momentum, and confidence through practical frameworks. Let's dive into how to lead with grit and grace, build a business that actually serves your life, and stay sane when you're fighting the good fight. Chris, welcome to Coach Launch.
Thanks, Matthew.
I am super excited to dive into this today. We were talking before, and I've got some of your notes here, and we've got a lot to cover today. So to keep things spinning forward, let's jump into it. So tell me, what are some of the things, so that people know who you are and what you've been up to? What are some of the accomplishments, some of the great things that you've accomplished so far that we can kind of dive through?
That's a good question. I've been doing this for a long time, and I did the math the other day, and of the last 39 years that I've been working as an adult, only 4 of those years I've worked for somebody else, and that started when I was young. So I've had a lot of different opportunities. I've been in several different industries. I've had a few exits. I've been able to sell some businesses. I'm what you'd call an entrepreneur. That's a word I kind of coined a couple months ago because, everyone says serial entrepreneur, right? Well, I'm like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, and like most entrepreneurs, we get something rolling, we're visionary, and then all of a sudden we see another shiny object and we take after it. So I have a long history of that. But yeah, I've had some great successes over the years. And I've received some awards, those are always flattering and kind of cool. They certainly don't pay the bills. They look good on the wall to have these nice shiny plaques that say, hey, you've been successful. But yeah, I've had some success. And I just had an exit just towards the end of last year. We sold our last restaurant. We got into the restaurant business for a little while. And that was, the restaurant business is tough. It's different than anything I've ever done before. It was really cool because there was a lot of my personality in the restaurant. As you can see behind me, I love hot rods and Harley Davidson motorcycles. And so that was a theme of our restaurant. And so it was really cool that way because people could see my personality. But man, it's a difficult business. So I was fortunate enough to have an exit and actually get some money out of the deal. That's when I decided to lean into this coaching gig. I love helping other people. I love serving others. And so this is a great way for me to give back to the community.
What's interesting is that to exit out of a restaurant or to sell a restaurant is not an easy thing in and of itself. Like I read a statistics the other day about restaurant owners, and it's one of the most failed businesses in the world, which is probably quite true because it seems easy to get into, and a lot of people kind of go in that direction. However, there's a lot of complexity in a restaurant. It's competitive. Got to keep your reviews up, and there's so much in it, right?
Oh, yeah. And people will tell you, restaurants are easy to open, but they're really hard to keep open. I mean, that's just the saying, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and there's so many moving parts. And you're so reliant on the general public, so everything has to be perfect. And it's amazing how quick people are to give you a bad review. I mean, you can have 10 5-star reviews, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and gives you a 1-star review. And I take that personal. I mean, I used to read and respond to every review in all of our restaurants.
Wow.
There were some days when they really kind of pissed me off when I had to respond to some stupid review. But it happens, and we used it as a learning experience. We'd go back to our team, and I'd always read every review. I'd read the good ones, I'd read the bad ones, and we'd use that as an opportunity to get better. But yeah, If you ever want to get into the restaurant business, Matthew, you call me up ahead of time and I'll give you the truth and talk you out of it. Don't do it.
Don't get down the ledge.
Yeah, I'll help you.
I hear you. I hear you have to have a lot of systems and the right attitude. There's so much that needs to happen for a good restaurant to work. Obviously, there's an industry of it that has success, but it's not for everybody. And here's an interesting thing you just talked about, the reviews, right? There's nothing worse than having a business where you're chained to the reviews. We have a real estate business and we've done guest houses and that type of thing in the past. And my partner is also very good at systems, and she would set up these guest houses perfectly, like really high quality. And then you would have some person that's coming along and giving you this bad review for no particular reason. And they had a hangover, say, or something, right?
Nothing to
It
do.
would be,
Nothing to do with you. Did
yeah,
everything perfect, but yeah, I might have someone come in and we used to make really good street tacos in our restaurant. I mean, people loved
right.
our street tacos. Well, like I said,
Yeah,
I'd have 10 5-star reviews, best taco I ever had. And all of a sudden you have one person that just doesn't like our seasoning or doesn't like how we, it's something weird about it. And then they have to go give a 1-star review for no reason other than that. I mean, I'm telling you, yeah, you can do everything
spread
right.
it.
Everything right. Yeah. Or they might come into the restaurant hungover and they're not feeling good. Sometimes, you have people that work for you in the restaurant and they're people and they're not perfect and they're going to have moments where they don't do their best or they're busy. And, there's a line
Yeah,
where we're packed and people get upset about waiting. Well, sorry.
what can you do, right? It's tough. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky gig. But here's the thing, you've run multiple businesses, you've been very successful, and to exit out of a restaurant is very good. So well done for that. I have to say, not many people get to do that. Usually they're shutting the doors and closing down and
Well,
off they go, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So amazing works. Now, tell me, you're into business coaching, you're helping entrepreneurs, CEOs, and people elevate their game. Tell me a little bit about that and why should people listen to you when it comes to this?
You know, over the years, I've always sought out mentors in my life, people who were in my business, people that I respected, people that I could talk to about, how to run a business or the ins and outs. And I'll have to admit, early on, when I first got into business on my own, I had a mentor who told me, he said, Chris, don't be afraid to go find somebody in your own industry who's doing it and doing it right. And don't be afraid to go sit down with them and say, hey, help me. And I did that. I started doing that. So I found that, like, for example, the restaurant business, I have two really good friends here locally that own restaurants and they're successful. They're doing it. They're making it happen. Well, they were really cool. I could go to lunch with them and sit down and talk to them, and we could talk about the business, and they would share with me stuff they're doing, and they would ask me for what I was doing, and we all had this really abundance mindset where one of the restaurants is literally 3 blocks down this road from my restaurant, and we are competition. But he is so good at what he does. He's been there so much longer. He was not threatened one bit about me being down the street. And both of our philosophy was if we could help each other be better, well, that's just good for the whole industry. And so I always had mentors that I loved having in my life. So as I became older and I became the wise one, that people came to me that wanted me to help them, that was a little flattering, but I like I said, I love helping people. So I became a mentor. I helped other businesses. And so when I had this last exit and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because I can't just sit around and do nothing, I decided this was a great opportunity to take all those experiences I've had, the good, the bad, the ugly. I've had some failures. I've had my teeth kicked in, so not everything's perfect, but even those failures are great learning experiences. And I can take what I learned from failing and I can help somebody else avoid a scenario that might cost them money or cost them, whatever. But for me, I'm not taking, my college degree because I'm so smart. I went to college and I got a degree. I'm not doing that. I'm taking real world, real life experience that I've had and helping other people apply it to their business. And it's worked. I love sitting down with these other business owners and helping them any way I can and sharing my experiences. Or sometimes I'm just an ear. I'm just sitting there listening. I'm there for them to vent Because the other thing that we've learned as entrepreneurs and business owners, it can get damn lonely at the top. You don't have people you can talk to. You don't have people you can vent to. You don't want to necessarily take it home. I mean, my wife sometimes gets a little bugged at me because when I leave the office and close the door, man, I leave everything behind that door and I want to go home and I want to check out and relax and I don't want to deal with business stuff. So I don't want to talk about it. And so for owners, I think any owner listening to this realizes how difficult that is to, who do you talk to? So I have clients that just want me to sit across the desk and just listen so they can vent. I'm not there to solve their problems. They just need someone to listen to. So that's been a lot of fun. And, because I've had experience in a lot of different industries, that helps. But quite frankly, running a business, no matter what the industry is, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of skill set that you can talk about that can help anybody, no matter what the industry is. I've been learning new industries. I've been helping other owners and founders, and it's been cool. So your question is why should they listen to me? Well, I've done it. I've been there, done that. Most likely I've been down that road. I've had that failure. I've had that success. And so I think I'm pretty well qualified to share some real world business advice to anyone that's looking for it.
Amazing. And here's the thing that I've learned in business and growing our businesses and creating wealth is you can't do it by yourself. You've got to have other people around you by your side. Your network is your net worth. And just having one conversation can totally change your whole life, your trajectory in your business. Oftentimes, it's the conversation that we as entrepreneurs have with somebody, say, for instance, speaking with you might not be delivering any expertise, but the conversation that you guide and direct can open up insights that you never thought about before because you're speaking to somebody experienced or somebody who's an expert. And so you say things and you say, well, have you thought about that? Boom. And that can change lives. I've seen it many, many times. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, and Matthew, you know this very well, but sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you don't see. You kind of have blinders on. You don't really see what's going on around you. And so having an extra set of eyes can open up, different, like you just said, there could be an opportunity sitting there that you're just blinded because you're so focused that talking to somebody else, they could ask you that question or say, what about this or what about that? Or maybe, I've been in that situation and I say, hey, have you ever considered going down this road? There's a great opportunity to open it up. And I think for the most part, 2 minds, 3 minds, 4 minds are better than one. And if you can work together, you're going to be so much more powerful and create some great results. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Absolutely.
Tony Robbins talks about pattern recognition. And in life, we got to understand the patterns in life. And when somebody like you has been experienced in doing stuff for so many years, you pick up a lot of patterns, right? And you understand there's certain things that do and don't work because you've experienced the hardship or the breakers and the successes. And so a lot of new entrepreneurs don't have those pattern recognitions yet. And a lot of us, when we start out in business, we're like, I can do this, I can do it all by myself. But
Yeah.
having somebody who's already recognized so many patterns in life and in the world, how much that shortcuts the process from where you are now to where you want to be.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, those are wise words. And for a young entrepreneur, I've learned those lessons. I've learned that there's actually people, because as you mentioned, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we're really smart and we know everything and nobody does it as good as we do it. Right. And it wasn't till early on in my very first company, it was a small company. I had 2 fellows that worked for me. We were general contractors and I did all the work. I mean, and like I said, no one could do it as good as me. So I had my 2 carpenters working with me and we always did every job. Well, I hurt my back. I had a really bad accident and hurt my back. And I was stuck in bed for 2 weeks, couldn't get out of bed. And so at that point, I had to rely on the 2 guys that worked for me to go do the work. And what I realized is they were actually better than me. I mean, I admitted that, right? But they actually did the work better than I did. And when I got out of bed and was able to get back to work, it still took me a long time before I could actually physically work. But I
Right.
started focusing more on getting new business and giving them the work to do. And then I split those 2 up. And now all of a sudden we're doing 2 to 3 times the work that I was doing when I was healthy. And it was that experience right there that taught me that, hey, you can do a lot more if you have good people and you train them and teach them on what you want done and then let them go do the job. And so, that's something I learned early on that, maybe other business owners won't have that opportunity to have a back problem where they get forced into not being able to work. But I can share that experience with them. I can share, hey, this is what I learned. And man, I learned that there's people out there that do the work better. So as long as you can give them some direction, give them some guidance, hold them accountable and treat them like they're going to be awesome and they're going to do a great job. And that's the only way. And you can't scale a business unless you have that. If you don't have that ability to bring other people in and make sure they understand what you expect and then go let them do the work, there's no way you're going to scale. Never. So I was fortunate to learn that lesson early on. I learned it the hard way, but I did learn it early on. And every business I've had, I've been able to do that and I've been able to replicate that. And, I still find myself getting in that little trap of, I can do it better. I still, Matthew, you and I, we're pretty smart guys. I mean, we're super smart. We're the smartest guys on this podcast right now, for sure. But, sometimes, so yeah, I think that's an important part of this is learning to recognize those opportunities, learn how to, lead other people in an effective way. And that's really the key to scaling to success.
So I love those, and we'll dive into a few of those things in a minute. I want to take a minute and go back in your journey. Paint me a picture or a timeline or what is your story? Where did you come from? How did you start getting into entrepreneurship? What was your early beginnings like? And tell me where you grew to.
Yeah. Well, I was born in California, raised in Montana, you know, parents divorced when I was 8. I was always pretty self-sufficient. Had my first job at age 14, washing dishes at a steakhouse. I was a hard worker. My dad did a good job of instilling work ethic in me, which I really appreciate. My dad would always tell me how I could do anything I want. As a kid, you go, yeah, whatever. You don't listen to your parents or what do they know? But my dad would always tell me that, and it's sunk in. And so when I became an adult and started working for another company, I had what we call an entrepreneurial seizure, and I decided that I can go do it myself and do it better. So I went out and started my own company, and that was a construction company. It was me and a truck, and I started working for other people. I didn't have any formal training, but I worked for other people that did it. People would ask me, hey, can you do this job? And I'd never done it before, but my answer was always, yeah, I can do that. And then I'd go learn how to do that and then get the job done. And I just kept moving on. At the height of my construction company, we owned 4 different companies. We were a contractor. We built new homes. We remodeled homes. We had a high-end custom cabinet shop. We had an electrician working for us. We had an electrical contractor, and we were also doing real estate development. And so, at that point, I had about 50 or 60 employees, and we were having some great success. But then, we had this recession here in the States back in 2008, 2009, and I'm not sure how it felt over there, but it was pretty bad. And me being a very optimistic and persistent human being, when I heard grumblings of the economy having problems, I ignored it and I just pushed forward like I always do. I just plowed ahead. And so I got beat up pretty good in that 0809. I was lucky enough to sell a couple companies. I had to close one company. I had to shut it down completely. I spent a lot of time at the bank working out and working through some of the investments I had. I did some things right. So I had some cash set aside to support me during that period, which I was very lucky because I didn't have income I went without income for probably 2 or 3 years. And I was in the process, I had to reinvent myself. And that's when I got into the hospitality. I started a development up in Lake here, a little resort town, and started building a hotel and some condominiums. And that's when we opened our first restaurant. We opened a spa. We had some retail stores, some hotel properties, and some Airbnbs. And, went to town, did it again, built it up, had some great success there, had a few challenges, and then decided to expand the restaurant and do more restaurant stuff, which I don't listen, Matthew, I don't live in regret. I have 0 regrets in my life. It's like, I like who I am today, and I am a result of all those experiences that happened to me. Right. And so I have 0 regret. but yeah, I mean, are there things I would do differently if I go back? Probably, but you can't do that now. So I just keep moving ahead. So that's kind of a bounce around story of what I did and where I came from. And, I bootstrapped everything. I built everything from scratch. That's just how I am. I have an idea
Oh,
and then I just go to
so,
town.
tell me something. I'm a bit interested. You said you had 2 years of no income. Now, most people would go get a job. What was your thought process? What were you thinking during that time? I want to hear, what are your thoughts on this?
So the last job I had was in 1994.
Wow.
Job I had. And I'm a terrible employee.
That's what I thought you were going to say, right?
Yeah. And it never, you know what, funny, but that thought never entered my mind. Actually, during that recession, I never entertained the idea of getting a job. It's just not how I'm programmed. So I was always just looking for, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
We learned, so what's next? And then that's when I went to work on what's next. So yeah, never even thought about getting a job.
So interesting. That is such an interesting concept. And that's the thing about entrepreneurship, right? Like I didn't work in a job for many years. And the thought of going to work in a job, like it just doesn't even comprehend. Like as you said, you become employable or you're a bad employee, which is what I was too. And that's the thing that you got to understand, right? Like it's like you put your back against the wall and now you got to just keep moving forward. That's how I think anyway.
Yeah. And although, when things are tough, there's moments where you think, oh, it'd be so nice just to get a paycheck and just leave at 5 o'clock and be done and not have the stress. You think that, but Matthew, your mind works the same way. You think about that for a minute, and then you think of all the reasons why that's a terrible idea. You think about working for somebody else. You think about being told what to do. You think about all of a sudden all the other things come into play, and then you're like, okay, well, forget that. Now I'm just going to keep going and do what I do.
We help people these days sell high ticket coaching programs and we do event consulting. But if I wind back a few years, when we hit the GFC, and you talk about losing everything, I lost everything as well. My business totally blew up in smoke and had really nothing, like no opportunities. And I had never worked in a job before, except maybe as a waiter back
Yeah.
when I was really young.
Yeah.
And so my opportunities were very limited for me personally. I went into construction and I had I really didn't have anything. I started sweeping floors in construction. Like that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
And what I found out in construction though is, I mean, you got good people, but there's a lot of lazy people in that industry as well, right? And
Yeah.
it's very kind of protected, especially here where we stay. And so I found that if I put my hand up and did the extra, you know, needed help on a Sunday, needed this extra thing, I found that people started liking that, especially the people that were running the businesses, right? Because
Yeah.
they obviously want people that work hard. And what was very fortunate for me in my entrepreneurial mindset was that in no time I was able to build up a career in that. And in about, I would say 5 years, I was running 100, 150, $180 million projects from no skills, no experience. Anyway, for
Yeah.
me, that was a really bad choice because what happened was I then got caught up with these golden handcuffs. Because
Yeah.
I was doing this job so well, I limited myself. I kept myself in getting a wage, right? Because when you get a wage, you can't make more money, right? It's a cap. And I thought this was great. I was earning good money. And the pat on the back that I was getting for doing the job good was like, it motivated me to just stick around in this thing. And so, unfortunately, on the other side of the coin, the two directions, right? I got stuck in these golden handcuffs doing a job that I hated for too long, doing the thing, until eventually I decided to burn my bridges.
Yeah.
Brings me to where I am now. But if you're working in a job like this, it's the worst feeling, right? You got a cap. You can never really scale past that cap, and it sucks, right? So good on you for not doing that. I made the mistake.
Yeah.
I wish I hadn't.
I moved to Utah in 1993, a young family. I was married, had one kid, and I didn't know what I was going to do in Utah. I didn't know what I was going to do for a career. So I just went and got a job. And I thought, I'll do this job for 6 months And then another opportunity came up and I was recruited to do another thing. So I went and did that for 6 months. And then another opportunity came up and I did that for 6 months. And that was in construction. And that's when I realized that, hey, this is kind of cool. I've always liked construction. And everything I always did, I was very professional. And I'm sure it's the same in Australia, but the construction industry isn't always known for being super professional. The larger companies are, but a lot of the smaller home builders and remodelers just aren't known for, they don't have a reputation of being very professional. So I thought, if I could bring a level of professionalism and a level of customer service into the residential construction world, I would have an advantage. And that's exactly what I did. And that's why we had so much success, because we would show up on time. We would always do what we say we're going to do. If we gave somebody a budget, we stuck to the budget. If we told somebody the job was going to be done, we made sure the job was done. So we were very professional in how we did the work, and people loved that. And then, you could charge a little bit more, you get referrals, and then you get a reputation as being really good at what you do. And that really helped my business scale. And I'll have to say that was like what you did. You showed up on a job site and realized that, man, I don't have to do much to set myself apart from everyone else. And you did it. You started setting yourself apart, and then you started getting more responsibility. And yeah, you were certainly tightening the handcuffs on yourself, but that's just how you think. That's how I think, is do something better, do something different, provide a level of service that the customers are impressed by. And that's very important to having success.
So good. Is that something that you help people with in your coaching, like to get those types of systems set up and working? Because it's not an easy thing to do. Let's face it, right? Like most entrepreneurs get caught up in this running around like headless chickens, trying to do so many things. I love the context of you talking about finding those people to fit the gaps, but those things are not easy. How do you help people kind of define or break through or work on getting and hiring new people and doing that thing,
Wow.
increasing the level of
And that's a tough one, because the employment pool is such an important part of your business. So every business I've ever been involved in was very customer service oriented. Because I really love serving people, I made sure that every business I was in took customer service to another level. We made sure everyone had a really great experience. We took care of our customers. We treated them differently. And so the restaurant business was no different, because you want to make sure that people that come into your restaurant not have good food, that place clean, the servers are pleasant, the whole experience is positive, right? And so for me, servers were key. And so I always thought we need to hire good personalities, people who are pleasant, people that are really good with our guests, and we can teach them how to be servers. Teaching somebody how to serve food isn't that hard, but teaching people how to have a good personality is crazy difficult. And so in my opinion, it's, you got to hire good people who represent you and your company, and then train them how to do the job. So, and then another thing that,
what I hear is you're looking for people with certain personality traits rather than people with the ultimate like educational skills. Let's
yeah,
say.
because, when you own a restaurant and you put a help wanted ad out, there's a lot of people that know how to work in a restaurant, right? A lot. But there's a lot of people that know how to work in a restaurant that have zero personality, that don't like their job, don't like talking to people. And you just can't hire those people, but you can take a good personality and train them. Now, as far as the cooks go, the guys behind the back of house guys, you can get away with a little bit less of a personality because they're not going to interact with your customers. So as long as you have a really good cook who will cook the food the way it's supposed to be cooked consistently and get along with the rest of the team, they don't have to be the personality, right? Because they're not going to be interacting with the customer very often.
They need to have the skills to deliver a customer service value anyway for people, because it's nothing worse than tasting food that's not good.
Right, because that's their main focus, is make sure that food's perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's the same that applies. I have a client right now who's a contractor, and he has a couple guys that work for him that are good guys, that have a good personality. They're really good with customers. And he has a few that aren't. They're good workers, they're great carpenters, they're good project managers, but they're not good with customers. So, he's in the process. We're helping him restructure his business a little bit so that the guys that are good with customers are spending time with the customers. The guys that aren't
Yeah.
good with customers are not. And it's funny how it took him a while to figure that out. Like he didn't understand what was wrong, and he was getting so many complaints about certain guys that were not very social. So
Yeah.
little changes and things are already better because now the customer is somewhat isolated from that guy because he's over here on the project. And so we've done some things like that to help, and it's making a big difference.
That's interesting. It's like giving the chef, like the chef knows he's good at that thing, right? And your waiters, and it's like this is an analogy for any business, I think. It's like your waiters are your front of staff, right? The people that are facing. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone into a building, right? Into an office building, and sometimes the people that welcome you, they're in maybe at a hotel or whatever, they're happy, they're vibrant, you feel good energy. Then every now and then you'll walk into a office block and there's this person, they're just grumpy as hell. And it just makes you not enjoy that experience, right? It's important to have the front of your business running and welcoming. And
Yeah.
if there's people that are not so good with the personality, if they're good with the delivery of the thing, like that's also a good thing too, right? It's just how
Yeah.
you balance the business.
Yeah. Now I did a leadership training 20 some years ago at a Ritz-Carlton hotel.
Yeah.
And, if you're a Ritz-Carlton, they teach everybody how to take care of the customer. They are really good at teaching everybody how to take care of the customer. The people that are cleaning your room, the gardener, of course, the front desk clerk,
Wow.
but everybody. And somehow it's the same thing with Disney. I did a lot of reading and studying of Disneyland and Walt Disney, and he does the same thing. He has put together a training program, where he's training his people that everybody who touches that park and who comes anywhere near customers is trained to provide that wow experience. And that's not easy. It's hard. It takes a lot of work. But, when I went to that leadership training at Ritz-Carlton, their managers spend 80 hours a year on training, and their non-management employees spend like 40 hours a year on training. And what that does is they talk about it. They talk about it. They talk about it. They hire good people, and then they talk about the customer experience all the time, so that everybody that works in that organization is always thinking about it. They never let their guard down. They never relax. They're always reminded and trained how to make the customer experience awesome. And so, having studied Disney and having studied Ritz-Carlton, that was part of my objective, and my goal was to make sure that everybody in my business was trained to do that. Now, I'll have to say that, we've had some pretty good cooks, and we had cooks that would enjoy going out into the dining room and talk to customers, and that's cool because they also felt like they had that responsibility to make sure the customers are happy. So I think it's just important that once you decide what your goal is with your business, what kind of customer experience you want to provide, you have to
Yeah.
talk. You just can't ever not talk about it.
So then you're building the culture, right, through your entire business,
Oh,
improving
yeah.
the culture.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about systems?
If you feel like, I mean, even for a business that, even if you don't want to scale your business, the systems and processes are the key to having a successful business. There's no doubt about it. One of my clients, this is a interesting thing, but he's a butterfly farmer. He grows butterflies, right? And he learned early on to write down everything he did. Like when it was just him and he was just raising butterflies, he'd write down everything he did, how he did it, why he did it. And then when he hired employees, he would give them the list, give them a little training. And it was amazing how they could do their job and do it well because he had provided this system and this checklist of everything that needed to be done. Well, now I think right now he has about 6 or 7 full-time employees, and the butterfly season is ramping up. So he'll probably end up with 20 to 25 employees. But having all these little systems in place have made his job so much easier, less stressful for him. It's easier to train his employees. It's easier to tell if they're doing their job or not. And I'll have to say, in the restaurant, man, every position had a list, had a system, had a process. And then what we did was kind of cool is I turned their list into a report card. So the job they were supposed to do, and we would rank, we would judge it on how they did. And then I'd put that into a spreadsheet and it would spit out a grade. And then every week I'd post the grades for all of our employees on the wall in the break room so that everyone could see how they ranked against their coworkers. And it was super cool because I created this competition where they were like, oh man, I was third place. I got to do better. And then they would talk to their manager and say, well, why did I get graded the way I did? And the manager could then explain, well, this is what you didn't do so well because we had it all on a list. We had everything listed out. And so having systems and processes like that are key to success.
It's
And
so
in
good
fact,
that you were able to create that.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so we would do it weekly. And then every month at our monthly meeting, I would average the weekly scores and we would rank everyone on a monthly basis and we'd give them awards. So, we'd split them up into, different areas that they worked in. And then every month at our monthly meeting, we'd give them some sort of an award for being the top, grade. And that was really cool.
You gamified the process, right?
Oh yeah. And they loved it. They always looked forward to that monthly meeting when they could, hopefully
Wow.
they would win. And, one thing that Disney is there's three things that have to happen in any business in order to provide this wow experience for your clients. I mean, have you ever been to Disney World or Disneyland?
Yeah, I've been to the one in Paris.
Yeah. And it's a pretty cool experience. The three
Amazing.
things that
My
he says,
first in, last to leave.
yeah, the three things are you have to have great people, you have to have a great place, and you have to have great processes. And if you can have all three of those things all line up, then your customers have a wow experience. People, great product, and great processes. And that's key. So I've always focused on those three things. And it's worked. We've had some great success as far as the customer experience goes that we're pretty proud of.
Amazing. That's so cool. And I can totally understand it. I mean, like doing that gamification process, when you started talking about it, I was like, wouldn't some people get annoyed with that thing? But I think it's how you delivered it because you said everyone looked forward to the meeting every month to have fun with the thing. And so even though you're doing these things and grading people, it's not so much about putting them down, but building them up, right? And giving them ability to want to do better in that thing. Because I've seen that happen in some industries where people go like, oh, like it's not something that they want to be graded or they want to like feel like if maybe they don't get a good enough mark, they're not so good. So talk to me about how you created that culture or how you created that environment where people would be like, I'm looking forward to this meeting now. Like, even though you've graded them, like, how does that, like, that sounds so interesting to me.
Yeah, well, we used to have a lot of fun with it. Those monthly meetings, we would recognize birthdays, we'd recognize anniversaries. My goal at this meeting was to help our people feel good about themselves and to help our people enjoy working there and enjoy coming to the meeting. So we were always giving stuff away. We would show up at those meetings with like a table covered in, candy or prizes or whatever thing that our manager would buy. And so I always tried to make it fun. And I wanted our employees to get, you know, in the real world, where do people get positive reinforcement?
Yeah.
Some people go to church, maybe they get it at church, but for the
Yeah.
most part, they don't get it unless they're reading good books and most people go home, they watch a movie, they watch some dumb reality TV. They're not getting any positive reinforcement. So my objective was to be that source of positive reinforcement or positive enlightenment to them. And so that's why it was important for me to, when we had our meetings, we made it fun. I usually give a little speech about something fun and how we can do better and how we can improve our lives. And I always made it light and I always made it fun and we'd give away stuff. And even if somebody, we had this little award called Above the Line. So if a manager saw an employee doing something above and beyond what their job was, they would let me know. And then at that monthly meeting, I would give them a special little award. Maybe it was cash, maybe it was a candy bar, maybe it was their favorite drink or something. Say, we caught you doing something more than what was expected of you, and we appreciate it, and we would recognize those people. So for me, I tried to focus on that. I tried to make it fun. I tried to, you know, give them something in their lives that was good, make coming to work a
Yeah,
good time, So it's not easy, but that's just how my personality is. I always figured, if I want every one of my companies to treat my customers well, then maybe I should treat my employees the way I want them to treat my customers. Seemed to
very
work
good.
pretty Yeah, it seemed to work pretty good.
That does a lot for culture and does a lot for boosting your business. I don't think a lot of people realize how important that is to be able to create that culture in business, right? I'm loving this discussion. Like, there's so many paths we could go diving down into this because it doesn't just relate to restaurants. I mean, we're talking about restaurants, but this is across the board for multiple businesses, any businesses, right? That type of infrastructure, looking after your staff, finding the right staff, finding people. And when you got the right people, I mean, we talked about personality, having people the right fit. I mean, that's obviously, if it was easy, everyone would be rich, right? So you've obviously developed some really keen systems and processes and understandings in all of this stuff that you're talking about, which is very translatable across multiple businesses. Like, and I'm thinking about all of these things. So talk to me about your way of doing and helping people, like your systems, your processes, and what you do with people.
Well, okay. Probably right now, for me, it's a little bit different now because I'm working one on one with a business owner, and not every business owner is the same, and not every business owner has the same needs. And so, for example, what I do is when I'm hired by a client to come in, I'll meet with them and find out what they're doing, what's going on, and get their take on it. But what I do is one of the systems that I've implemented in this coaching business, I will go through and interview each one of their employees. I have certain questions that I do one on one, and I try and create this safe environment for them where they know that whatever they tell me is confidential. And I ask certain questions, and I do that with all the employees. If they have customers, I'll sit down with their customers and do the same thing. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to identify opportunities for improvement. So sometimes I'm able to flesh out opportunities that the owner doesn't even have a clue. He has no idea because, once again, he's so buried in the woods and he's stressed out and he's trying to figure out just how to keep the doors open. He has a hard time seeing the opportunities where we can improve. And so through that process, I'm able to identify opportunities, and then I sit down with the entire team, and I put every one of those opportunities on the board and say, hey, owner, and this is the deal. The rule is the owner can't say a word. He has to sit there and listen, right? He just has to sit there and listen. And I put up those opportunities on the board and say, okay, there's this, and this. And it's really enlightening. And then what we do is we then address each one of those opportunities, and we create a action plan on how to improve that. And then usually what happens is, as you know, the owner thinks he can do it all himself. And that's one of the first things I do is say, look, you're not doing this. We're going to give that to this other person, and we're going to create this action plan, and they're going to report back on how their progress is going. And we're going to set a goal on when it has to be done. And so what that also does is it gets the team involved, because usually most of the time when I interview the team members, they do feel like they're not given enough opportunity to help improve the process. And so when I sit down and go over these opportunities for improvement, and then we delegate that to one of the employees that wants to improve it and wants to get better, man, they love it. They have ownership. They get to work. We set a plan where they have to follow up and tell us how they're doing. So that right now is probably one of my I enjoy doing that. I just love doing it. The interview process, because I can get so much information, and it's not a bitch and moan session. It's not these employees just ripping on the boss. It's like me saying, what would you do differently? What would you do better? What are the opportunities that you see? And, sometimes I have to receive all that information, and then I have to kind of process it, because, sometimes there is a little bit of a bitch and moan session, right? It's there. I get it. And I get those one-offs that are just angry. And there's been times, Matthew, where I've sat down with the owner and said, hey, this guy's got to go. This guy isn't a good fit for you. There's nothing you can do to fix it. You just need to sent him packing. And
Yeah,
sometimes that's the reality of it.
it is true.
I had one the other day where his bookkeeper just wasn't good. I could tell his bookkeeper didn't have a clue what he was doing. And I said, look, man, time for a new bookkeeper, because you're not getting the information you need to determine if you're having success or not. And this poor guy is overwhelmed, is undertrained. You need to replace him if you want to know what's going on financially in your business. So yeah. So
How amazing is that, right? For most business owners, they run around with all these blind spots, right? We got things that we're not recognizing, things that we don't. Maybe our partner says, hey, you should do this thing. And we're like, just because you're on this steam train, right? You're on the train, it's just going on the tracks and it's going in one direction. We often get blinded and we don't see these blind spots. What I love about what you've just said is that you've brought in your experience, your knowledge, and you're helping people to really bring in those blind spots and to be able to get more clarity and understand there's better opportunities here and what you can get rid of so you can go forward faster, right?
yeah,
I love that. And it's like, if you want to be the best entrepreneur in your business or grow your business fast, you need somebody in your business and life that's going to be real with you. Is going to tell you, hey, this is the reality. This person is not good for your business. Now you can take my advice or not. It's up to you. But hey, what I can see is it's not good. And if you're coming from that perspective where you've seen things in your business, personally in your growth, helping other people, like that's so invaluable because we don't get that, right?
yeah. And I'll have to say, I think like when I first started doing this a lot, I would sit down with the owner and, most of the time, because I have so much experience, most of the time I think I already know what the answers are going to be before I even go interview the employees, right? But I still have to do it because there's still new things that come up or different things that come up. So I can't deviate from this little process, because even though sometimes I think I know, once I go through the whole process, it changes.
Yeah.
That's not what the problem was at all.
Yeah.
It's been fun to do it. And I've learned so much every time I do it.
One of the things I've learned in my business is that if you want to get the right answers, you've got to ask the right questions, right? You've got to ask the questions, whether it's customers, whether it's your staff, whether it's whatever. Questions give you depth and understanding. Sometimes we don't want to ask the right questions. We don't know how to ask the right questions. So that's, once again, super, super valuable. I mean, think about this, right? You have a staff member and they're quiet and they've been doing this thing for a while, but they're watching, right? They're watching what they could do, they're coming up with ideas. Maybe things are welling up inside of them. They never get to speak about that or give ideas or talk about that oftentimes. You come along and you're asking them this question and like all of a sudden they're like, oh, I've had this great idea. I thought about that. Now it opens up and you might not have seen it. The owner's never seen it. And now this guy has got like this great idea and you go like, oh yeah, how good is that? Like you're bringing the business into a full fruition.
Yeah.
Cool.
And people love it. The employees love it. I mean, sometimes, obviously I have to, when I have my one-on-one, I have to be very clear that everything they say is confidential. They
Yep.
can just, they can be
Course.
raw with me. They can be open with me. And one of the questions I ask is, what is something you'd like to tell your boss that you don't feel comfortable telling him directly? I mean, that opens up, right?
Kind of worms, eh?
Yeah, it does. And I've had clients who their employees say, well, I can tell them anything. And that's awesome. That's great when you hear that. But then you have other ones that say, yeah, man, the boss doesn't want to listen to me. He doesn't want to hear it. So yeah, it's really, people love it when you sit down and they open up and they'll tell you, and they can tell you're listening, you're taking notes, you're writing things down, you're digging a little deeper. So it really is good for the employee as well.
What does this do for businesses in general? Talk to me about some of the success stories and some of the things that you've been helping people with and the results that they've been getting.
Yeah, it's always different. But one of the, like, for example, the one I'm working on right now that's most active, um, it's been super enlightening for him, especially taking some stuff off his plate. Like, we went through this process, we identified the opportunities, we create an action plan, and then we handed off all these action items to his employees. And now he's sitting back, he's not stressed out as much because he has more time on his hands, and he's watching his people actually perform and come up with some good information and get some stuff done. And even people that he felt like, someone he thought, well, I don't know if she could do that. And I said, well, let's try it. It's her job. She oversees this area. Let's give it to her and see what happens. And then all of a sudden he gives it to her and she starts doing it. And all of a sudden she's kind of this different employee because now she's given this opportunity to step up and do some work. And it's been really great for morale. I've seen I mean, you know, right now the results we're seeing with his company is mostly just, the team morale. We're getting some things simplified. His business was very complicated and way too complicated for the size of business he was. So our overall theme is to simplify, and he's already feeling it. We've been in this process for 3 weeks, and he's already feeling the simplification. He's feeling things getting easier. He's feeling like he can do it now. He's feeling more confident in his abilities. You could tell he's actually now he's got his head above water. He can breathe a little bit because I think that's an important part of it. I think an entrepreneur needs to be healthy. If he's not healthy, if he's not taking care of himself, if he's not enjoying it, then it's just bad for business. And so if I can assist him in, enjoying life a little bit more, not being so stressed out, then that's part of the success I'm looking for. Is I want him to enjoy his life, enjoy his company, have success. That's what it's all about.
Yes, and I don't think there's a better ROI than time. If you win back time, it's not always about the money, right? It's also like I want to have some mental clarity and some perspective and win back some of the time so you're not chasing all these things in your business and wearing all the hats, right? Pass those hats around to different people that can handle the load from you.
Yeah.
How good is that?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think in the entrepreneur world or founders or owners, there's four major challenges they each have in their business. One is money. Money's always an issue. One is isolation. They're lonely at the top. One is just stress in general about everything that's happening. And the other is time. They don't have enough time. So I focus on those four areas and I help each owner identify, okay, where are you struggling? Maybe you have a ton of money and that's great, but you're super stressed because now you're spending 90 hours a week at the office and what's your family doing? So I can help them identify where they're struggling and then we can make a plan on each one of those. And like I said, I enjoy it. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
So it's my way of giving back.
Wow. So good. Chris, I've enjoyed this conversation today. It's been super inspiring and super interesting. Love what you're doing. So as we're closing off on this podcast today, how can people get hold of you? What is the next steps if people wanted to come and connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Shurian, easy. And our website, hopefully will be up here in a couple of weeks. It's Bootstraps and Battle Scars. And if you go to my website, bootstrapsandbattlescars.com, there you can contact me directly. You can check out some of my podcast episodes. I'm in the process of writing a book. So hopefully that'll be done here pretty soon. And I can at least start getting that out. But yeah, so the website, bootstrapsandbattlescars.com, and LinkedIn is a great place.
All right. Guys, we'll put that information in the show notes. To catch up with Chris, if you want to get rid of those blind spots, figure out how you can grow your business, win back some more time, Chris is the man. Chris, it's been an awesome honor hanging out with you today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. I appreciate it.